the way that Nikolai has played historically, how long he is off the tee, and him gaining 5 strokes on approach in Phoenix despite not having a great week, and his brother soaking up all the attention right now makes him a very viable play. If he opens 60-1 or higher, I am going to get in on that.
Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog, the Mexico Open. Research, picks, and preview. Obviously, Torrey Pines still going on as I record this, and fingers crossed we just get an explosive weekend. Would love to hit a winner. Don't get me wrong. And I do have Scotty Scheffler this week, so it makes me feel good about that. Although if I put my curse onto him, he's most definitely not going to win. So there's probably some value to be had on someone else. Obviously, we all want to see Rory versus Scotty on Sunday. That would be an epic showdown, and they've never actually been this close to each other in the lead of the same tournament going into the weekend ever. I saw Justin Ray tweet that out. In the back of your mind, you think about how good these guys have been over the past 2 years, especially since the ascent, over the past 3 years, really, since the ascent of Scotty Scheffler. But, it would be just a great duel to see. Got some stacked names on the leaderboard as well. I put out some Underdog plays and a thread out on Twitter as well going into round 3. Obviously, by the time you see this, that round 3 is going to be underway or even close to its conclusion, depending on when you're watching, really. But I'm going to try to do the same thing for round 4. If round 3 goes successfully, if I just lose everything, I'll probably just be sad and not end up doing it. Although my kids have been getting up earlier and earlier, so it just gives me more time to mess around with some of the research that I get from fantasynational.com. My walkthrough today is going to be powered by fantasynational.com, and realistically, the signature events, you're going to know who's good, who's bad, because it's all of the best players in the world. It's a lot of coin tossing that goes on. Events like the Mexico Open are where the stats really do come into play and really getting that extra research. So I'm going to do my walkthrough. If you're listening to the audio version, on Spotify, you should get the video version of this now if you want to check that out and see everything on the screen. And if you want to do your own walkthrough with me or just by yourself, fantasynational.com/Mayo will get you that 20% off. All right? The Mexico Open this year, it's the 4th year that we've seen it at this location, and as a part of the regular rotation on the PGA Tour, we had some class winners. Hit the winner here last year with Jake Knapp. I was away. Now, normally this is the week I take my vacation post-Super Bowl, and it's like, Mexico Open, who cares? But that's not the way my schedule will align. I'll actually be on vacation next week for the Cognizant, formerly the Honda Classic, although I believe I'm bringing my gear with me, so at least Jeff and I will have the pick show to do. I can't play DraftKings from there, so I don't know if Tambo and I are going to do the full DraftKings show, but Tambo and I will have a show available that week on the Wednesday. But I go live with Tambo every Wednesday morning now at 9 a.m. Eastern time. If you're up that early looking to kill time at work, please join us. We do a Q&A session towards the end. It's been successful so far. I think that people are enjoying us doing the live version of the final bets and then building those DraftKings lineups. So tune into there. Always show the support. Sub to Mayo Media Network. This year, year number 4, we do not get Tony Finau, which was kind of the linchpin to at least Byron's strategy of drafting those Underdog best ball teams that, hey, we're going to get an elevated guy. He's going to be the best player in the field. Obviously, he won it 2 years ago. He's always just a very short favorite to win this tournament. But we're not getting him this time around. We are getting Akshay, though. Akshay is going to be the most notable player in the field. Now, some of these guys at the very top end are within the top 10 at Torrey Pines going into the weekend. I don't know if anyone's going to be able to catch Rory or Scotty or even Davis Thompson or Patrick Rogers, whoever it is at the very top end. Now, Patrick Rogers is listed to be in the field currently for the Mexico Open, I believe. Let me double check on that. I thought that he was in the field. Yeah, he is in the field. And I guess if he wins, he probably doesn't play in Mexico. If Michael Kim, our guy Michael Kim, has a surge to the top of Torrey Pines, he'll probably WD from Mexico as well. But as it stands right now, it's a 144-player field. Top 65 in ties make the cut. And it's the first tournament of this nature that we've seen all year because we got a little bit of bleed over into Sony. Following Kapalua, guys were already in Hawaii, so they decided to play. Not like all of the top players. There was enough top players to make it a very strong field. Like we got Hideki in that field. We don't get Hideki this week. Akshay is the best that we're doing. Even then we got to American Express. Scotty normally plays that, and so does Xander, but they both had to WD. But we still had a really strong field with the Jason Days and Justin Thomases, Nick Dunlap making his return following his win at PGA West. And then we got into that really meat of the schedule, that 4-event stretch that was super solid between Farmers, Pebble, Phoenix, and obviously this week for the Genesis, once again at Torrey Pines, 2 of those being elevated events. We've seen the best take on the best. This isn't quite to the level of like the Puerto Rico Open or anything like that, but we do have some strong European players in the field because it's been so hard to get these starts, especially lately on the PGA Tour. I was looking into Nicholas Norgard Moller and be like, oh yeah, he's a great fit for Mexico. How's he been doing? It's like, well, he played the Farmers and he hasn't played since on the PGA Tour because there's just been no room for these guys to get into the field. So it has increased the field strength of Mexico for that next tier event. It's like the NXT, if we're thinking WWF terms. Like, we're not getting like all these guys aren't going to be in the Royal Rumble when like the main event. They're not going to be on the card at WrestleMania, but you're still getting a quality field this time around. So we got Akshay leading things off. We'll guess the odds a little bit later on. Both Højgaards in the field. Jake Knapp defending his crown. Our guy, Michael Kim, as mentioned, Patrick Rogers, Aaron Rye, Matt McNeely, Kurt Kitayama, Harry Hall, Keith Mitchell, Taylor Moore, Ben Griffin, Kevin Yu, Steven Yager going to be in the field once again, Sam Stevens, Thorpe, and then all the way down you have some spicy Euros making their debut, and all of like the regular dudes that we normally like playing. Like Rico Hoey is going to be in the field this time around. Patrick Fishburne. Remember his run? CT Pan, the Panimal. He's back following that sizzling second round in Phoenix that he did nothing with as we went through the rest of the weekend. So there's a lot of good names in the field this week. It's going to be pretty evenly distributed, and I'm excited to watch it because this course is pretty interesting. So let's jump over to the course in Mexico this time around. It is a 132 player field. Sorry, not 144, 132 player field. Top 65 and ties make the cut. Obviously, we're starting on Thursday, February 20th. Jake Knapp is the defending champion. Tony Finau won the year before that. And then we had Jon Rahm winning the inaugural event the year previous to that as well. It is a par 71, 7,456 yards. And I think that this is important, honestly, when we start thinking about it, because it's a par 71. There's an extra par 3. There's 5 par 3s at this course and 7,461 yards. Torrey Pines South is the course that we've seen played twice already. There is a direct link between this place and that place. More on that in a second. It's just the easier version of Torrey Pines. The only real defense this course has, as you can see on the screen, are the amazing amount of water just filtered around the course. 13 holes have water in play. There's 55 bunkers around. Paspalum greens, 7,000 square foot greens in total, which is higher than the normal end. It's just a very driver-heavy course. That's why I think that you see a big link between the guys that mash the ball off the tee from the back end at Torrey Pines who do well, had success here. That's why I was on Jake Knapp here a year ago. Just, man, he crushed it at Torrey Pines. Came T3. How'd he do that? Well, he hits his long irons really well, and he cranks it off the tee. Good enough for Jake Knapp. I believe he had a 4-stroke lead going into the final round, and then I had to sweat out Wacky Valimaki. But Valimaki doing well here last year was the reason that I got on him at Torrey Pines this time around, and it ended up cashing that top 40 parlay. He ended up coming top 15 in that field. Like, there is a link there, and more on that again in a second. There's the correlation between those two courses. Vedanta is going to be the second longest course played on tour after being adjusted to par after Torrey Pines so far, and I think overall, like maybe Quail Hollow ends up being more, but we're seeing Quail Hollow as a major this year. Kapalua was longer, but it's played at elevation, and it's a par 73. There's a par 71 at sea level, so this one's going to be longer. Valspar's sneaky like that as well. It's a par 71, so adjusted for par, it's actually a lot longer. Last year, Jake Knapp, Steven Yager, Tony Finau, Doug Gim, and Patrick Rogers all finished inside the top 10 of both Mexico and the Farmers, which is a pretty incredible number considering most of the top 15 finishers from the Farmers a year ago didn't play in the Mexico event. All those guys did, and they were able to double up, and it makes sense. Obviously, Torrey is harder and puts more of an emphasis on accurate driving and chipping, and the short putting is incredibly difficult at Torrey Pines South. But the longer you hit it off the tee, the shorter club you're going to have access to the pin, and that applies at every course, obviously, but it's a lot different here when we're talking about lengthier courses because it means fewer shots are going to be, what's really the difference between 100 and 125 yards to a PGA professional, even 100 to 150 yards. It's not all that much. 47% of the approaches at Torrey Pines come from 175 yards and beyond. 62% of approaches at Vedanta come from 175 yards and out. Unfortunately for the field, it's basically Torrey Pines easy. It's not north, it's not south, it's Torrey Pines easy. The rough is so short that missing fairways isn't really that big of an issue. It's like an inch and a half rough. Like that's like what I play with at my course. My course might even be longer than that, for Christ's sake. The greens are larger, they're slower because of the Paspalum greens, and they're super easy to read. Very high make percentage inside 20 feet, and even inside 5 feet. It's super simple. The around the green play, super simple here as well, and the par fives are less challenging. They're not really three-shot par fives. Eagles can be made on a lot of these. Hence, you see typically lower scores despite it being a par 71. The only protection it has, periodic winds and the 13 water hazards, so you can mash it anywhere you want off the tee, just don't get wet. I'm probably going to be breaking up the Denzel meme a lot over the weekend here, maybe even in the first few rounds. But like at Torrey, you're going to see shorter hitters do well, but they have to hit their long irons particularly well, and they got to make a ton of putts. It's just a harder path to the top of the leaderboard than anything else. Last year, only one of the top 7 on the leaderboard lost distance to the field. That was Justin Lauer, and he was right around average. The previous year is 10 of the top 11 gained in driving distance. So being the longest guy in the field isn't necessarily a requirement, but being above average really does seem to be. So that's what we're looking at for the field this week in terms of the stat profile that we want to have. Jumping over to fantasynational.com, we got Vedanta pulled up on the screen. There are 5 par 3s, an average distance of 195 yards. You can see there are 2 of them. I mean, number 17 is the 4th hardest hole on the course. It's 226, there's a 208, and there's a 195. The shortest one's only 170. So if you can score on the par 3s, there's not a ton of scoring on them. As you can see, only a 6% birdie rate on number 17. Everything else is right around 13%. These holes play in total over par. 4 of the most often parred holes on the course are the par 3s with right around a 70%. Knapp had 6 bogeys a year ago, but none of them came on the par 3s. That was really the key to his success. He had a par 3 birdie 3 of the 4 days. Then we get into the par 4s. The par 4s, 454 yards of total distance. You don't see a lot of shorties except for number 7, which is the easiest hole on the course, a 3% eagle rate, 60% birdie rate. It's only 300 yards. So if you can lock that in, that's another key this week too of having more of that distance means you don't necessarily even have to take driver at this hole. Some of the field is obviously going to have to if they want to get there in one, but your Jake Knapps of the world are probably going to take a 3-wood, maybe even like a skied 5-wood if they can really crank into it depending on how the wind is going that day. You can just control those clubs a little bit easier. 3 of the 3 toughest holes on the course are par 4s from holes 8 to 16, 10 being the most difficult, 475 yards. After that, you have the 505-yard par 4 16th, and then number 8 is 496 yards. So those longer par 4s, again, with that good proximity from beyond 175 yards, that extra distance, it will just make these holes a little bit easier. Just stay dry and everything will be okay. Then you got the par 5s. Beyond that really easy short par 4, you have these 4 par 5s, which are the next 4 easiest holes on the course. The lowest is number 12 at a 31% birdie rate. That's not really an eagle hole, but number 6 most definitely is 3% eagle rate, 2.5% eagle rate on number 18, 1.6 on 14. That one's 585 yards. You can kind of get there in 2, but it's going to be a bit more challenging as well. Knapp bogeyed a par 5 twice last year in his win, but he birdied holes 6, 14, and 18 multiple times over the course of the 4 rounds. So you really do need to make your bones on those. Again, that's where the extra distance really comes into play. We've seen Brandon do well at this course over the years, but it's mainly putting related. Like, dude just racks it up here on the greens and makes everything. It's just hard to bank on that year over year, trying to figure out who's going to be at the top of the leaderboard. Yeah, that guy might win. That type of player may win this week, but it's just so much easier to think about it the other way and be like, yeah, this dude's going to bomb it out and he's going to hit a 6-iron into these par 5s rather than have to go driver 3-wood. That's just the easiest way really to think about it, in my mind at least. Like, if I'm trying to predict this out and try to take the plays that I think are going to succeed, we'll find some guys that do well from shorter distances. But again, it's probably what you want to avoid here. Just stack up the driving distance distance guys, or at least plus distance guys, and be on your way. For DFS Streak, if you're playing Showdown on DraftKings this week, holes 2, 10, and 17 are 3 of the 6 hardest holes on the course, thus making it difficult really to bridge either 9 trying to figure it out, because hole number 10 being the most difficult on the course. I mean, you're not going to get a wraparound if you do start there. Maybe you have a little bit of it because 18 is a pretty big gimme on the front. It's the second easiest hole on the course, over a 50% birdie rate, a 2.5% eagle rate. Just throwing that in there, maybe you get lucky and you birdie number 17, or you go the other way. You go 18, 1, and 2. 18, 1, and 2 seems easier than to go 8, 9, 10, with 10 being the most difficult, only a 5% birdie rate. So if you're going to try it, if your guys can start on the back, that's probably a little bit easier, but frankly, there's not a decisive advantage either way. Let's take a look at the tournament history. At Vedanta, you can see there's not a ton going on here. We've only played it 3 times. Rahm left for Liv, so his win at minus 17 in 2022. Kitayama came in second. I remember that very vividly because I had money on Kitayama. I thought that he was going to run down Rahm, and then he skied one on a par 5. I believe it was the second last par 5. And he just put it in, I don't remember if he put it in the water over the green or he just got himself into such a crap position there was nothing left to him. But he ended up coming T2 that year. Davis Riley, David Lipsky, Alex Smalley, Patrick Rogers were all up there. Steven Jaeger has done very well at this tournament. 15th, 18th, and 3rd in his 3 runs. Rogers has had a top 10 in each of the 3 starts at this course as well. And you see someone like Grayson Sigg has back-to-back top 20s each of the past 2 years too, if that's something that you're a little bit interested in. But overall, Kitayama, Davis Riley, Lipsky, Alex Smalley, Patrick Rogers have the best. Actually, they don't have the best. Let's see here. Rogers, Jaeger, Griot, Grayson Sigg, and Carson Young have the best in their appearances. Overall strokes gained over those 3 years cumulatively. But you've seen like Akshay's played it once and came fourth. I remember because I had Akshay. He lost to Finau and Rahm that year. T2, Kurt Kitayama finished second in his one appearance. Wacky Valimaki a year ago finished second in his first and only appearance. Knapp won in his first and only appearance. Yeah, Carson Young with the 2 top 15s. Jaeger, again, top 20s each of the 3 years. Patrick Rogers, top 10s each of the past 3 years as well. 2023, that's the year that Finau won. Then it was Akshay in 4th, Griot in 5th, and no one else from the top 5. A year ago, it's more what we're going to see moving forward at this tournament, this type of field. Very similar names that we saw a year ago too. Plus, it's been strengthened because of the Højgaard factor, really, with both of them playing in this tournament. Knapp wins, Valimaki's second, Jaeger, CT Pan, Lauer all finished inside the top 5. Then you got P-Raj, EVR, who was the first round leader a year ago, 4chan Kim, Carson Young, they're all up there too. Who else did we get up there? Mav was inside the top 20, Norlander, Sig, Silverman, Aaron Rai, who's playing again, obviously, Keith Mitchell, Dylan Wu, just outside, Harry All had a top 10 here 2 years ago and was top 35 last year. He'll be back, and obviously he's playing much better golf this time around too. So we'll dig into last year's stats just a little bit to take a look at how Jake Knapp did it. Big off the tee, gained almost 9 strokes on approach and putted pretty well. He was even basically around the green, and that was just a huge bonus for him. Strokes gained approach-wise, so it was Knapp, Mitchell were decisively the 2 best in the field. Then it was Aaron Rai, Doug Gim, and Andrew Novak. There's Andrew Novak. Now, Novak did not finish inside the top 15 last year at the Farmers, although he challenged for the win this year at the Farmers. Looking back to see how we do, we see even Scott Stallings. Scott Stallings was another one. He missed the cut last year, but gained 5 strokes on approach. He's a winner at Torrey Pines in the past. So another just link between those 2 things. Harry Hall, Valimaki, EVR, Bobby Mack, Grayson Sigg, Johnny Vegas, another guy who had made the cut basically every year at the Farmers too, that it just ended up hitting his approaches really well. Couldn't really do anything else. Couldn't drive it, chip it, or putt it, but that's where we're at. We see that putting can take guys out. And it's not so much that they're missing a ton of putts, they're just not making from that mid-range, and that's really where you gain so many of your strokes. No shocker that Keith Mitchell did not make anything or chipped anything, because that's not what he does. Can't do either of those things. With Finau last year, he got off to a really slow start, although the approach play was still pretty good. Overall, tee to green, taking a look at it, was Knapp, Novak, Mitchell, Bobby Mack. Bobby Mack faltered a little bit, I believe, or did he? I can't remember if he made the charge on Sunday or fell back on Sunday. He ended up coming in 6th, and he ended up winning twice the rest of the year. His tee to green was super sharp. Most of it was just ball striking off the tee and on approach. Gim, Rye, Rogers, Valimaki, Eckroat, and CT Pan. Eckroat's interesting because you can see how well he did tee to green. He ended up winning in Mexico during the swing season, and he ended up winning the week after this at the Honda as well. You can see just great approach play, great around the green play. He's not a big hitter. That was not great for him. A wildly accurate hitter, not a long hitter off the tee, and that's what he used at Honda to really break through and get that first career win. So different things to look at, but realistically, it's tee to green that you really want, and extra distance if you can find it. We'll go to let's see here. We'll dig into the driving distance. You can see the 6 of the top 7 on the leaderboard all were plus distance. Lauer, as I mentioned, ended up 0.09 lost to the field on driving distance. So that's not really that big of a deal. You did have a few guys who dropped significant strokes, Gim and Novak being among them. They did hit a ton of fairways, and they're pretty good iron players, and they were able to make those putts. But after that, you can just see random dudes pop up. EVR and McNeely. Alvaro Ortiz Becerra gained a bunch of distance on the field, as did Finau. Norlander marginally, and then even down the list a little bit, like you even have guys like Cameron Champ who only hit the ball long, and that was good enough. Bramwagon, Hayden Springer. Springer's actually interesting here. He had a nice run at Farmers this time around. It's probably actually pretty decent to look at. Arg, when we look at his overall ball speed and get that updated. But we'll see. He is a pretty big hitter, and he just did pretty well. He finished 6th at Torrey Pines. So these are the guys at Torrey Pines. You can see Sam Stevens is going to be a very popular bet this week because he's doing well at Torrey Pines again this week. I do think for the quality of field that we're looking at in Mexico, that it's probably better to look at Farmers. Although 4 of the rounds are played at Torrey Pines at the Genesis, it's also an elevated event. You're just not going to see that many people from that tournament play this week. You're going to see more of these guys, like Christoph Ventura is in the field this week. So you have Stevens, Novak. Is Novak playing this week? Maybe Novak is actually he's too good now. Too good for Mexico, I think. Yeah, he's not playing this week, but Sam Stevens is going to be playing. So you have Stevens, Ventura, Hayden Springer playing. Will Gordon probably going to play. Lanto in the field. I don't know if Willett's in the field, but KH Lee I do think is playing. Let's see. KH Lee is playing. Is Willett playing? No, Willett is not playing, but you do see that Will Gordon is in the field. Will Chandler rates out pretty well too, but his off-the-tee game, not great. His putting and short game, top-notch over the past 12 rounds. I actually don't have a model built out for that. That's something that we'll do in a minute after we continue to run through some of these guys. Ricky Castillo, big off-the-tee. See if he is playing. Oh, Tricky Ricky. Yeah, Tricky Ricky's in the field here. You can see off the tee, very good. We'll take a look at his results just very quickly. He's someone that Sky was on at really deep odds at the Farmers, and obviously he cashed a nice top 20 for everyone, coming in T15. Off the tee, good. Approach good, putting pretty good. The chipping not so hot, and actually made the cut at the American Express as well. So there's a couple of guys you can kind of classify from the bottom end of this field who are just good at driver-heavy courses, and this being a driver-heavy course, something that you want to look into. So yeah, driving distance gain, he gains distance on the field. He's in every PGA Tour start, including the U.S. Open that he has played. He has gained on the field, generally accurate off the tee too. It's really the rest of his game that isn't super sharp, as we'll see. Although the approach play can spike, it's just he doesn't really chip, he doesn't really putt. He doesn't have he might have some experience. I have no idea where Ricky Castillo is from. Let's see, Ricky Castillo, golf. Let's bring this up here. Where is he from? He is so not good that let's see, at 22 years, 3 months, Castillo would finish as the youngest winner of the 2023 Korn Ferry season. Where's this dude from? No, I will not support you. I will not turn off my ad blocker, PGATour.com. He's from SoCal. Okay, so he's an American player. I was just wondering if he had a lot of experience if he was a Latin American player. Obviously, he is not, so that's probably not something we need to look too much into. It's just experience on Paspalum greens, slow greens. We do see a few of those guys. Like Martin Traynor is like the king of putting on Paspalum, and he's not even in the field this week. The problem is with Paspalum greens, by and large, that outside of this tournament, we don't get a ton of strokes gain data from them, so you kind of have to ballpark it when you think about results from Puerto Rico, from Corrales, all of the Caribbean events, and even the swing season event that we see in Cabo, who are guys that putt well at those. Just off the top of my head, I'm thinking Martin Trainer, Nasty Nate Lashley. Akshay is actually someone who putts well on all of those. He's competed pretty well. Carson Young is another one who I believe has had a lot of success on Paspalum greens by and large. But to take a look at Akshay, he's played well at some of those swing season events. He's too good for the swing season events now. But even last year, where did he play? He did not play in any of them. Nope. So the year before that, and second in Puerto Rico, he was 24th in Corrales. He was, so those are two of them that you can look at to see how well they end up doing. And then I believe he got his win in Panama on the Corn Ferry, which are Paspalum greens as well. Yeah, the Great Exuma, which I believe is a Panamanian course. Let's see. Sandals Emerald Bay GC is Paspalum. Where is this one? Yeah, no, it's in the Bahamas where he ended up getting his win on Paspalum. So that's just, another way that you can kind of think about it. Anyone else from the field this year? Carl Wan, Crazy Carl, Scott Brown. Scott Brown is like the king of the island events because he putts so well on Paspalum. There's Ben Griffin popping up. Chris Baker, the birdie maker. He's probably in the field this week. Ari All inside the top 20. Matt McCarty, who picked up a win during the swing season. Now, this is the 2002 event. We got that in 2020. In here, but there's different things, different angles you can take. I would try to look for the quality of player because we found out that Jake Knapp is a pretty good player, especially at driver heavy courses. We've seen him do well at Torrey Pines. Obviously, he's won here. I would actually consider PGA National a driver heavy course because we've seen longer hitters do well there, despite it being a shorter track. And then he popped up at Byron Nelson, so the Bunny Ranch would be another one to think about with quality of field being down in terms of strength, but the type of golf that you need to play, just mashing it off the tee and avoiding water. 3M would probably be another one to think about, where it's a big driver heavy course where you would have to avoid water. Just all of those things kind of linked together a little bit. So Jake Knapp makes a lot of sense because he does have that one elite skill. That's what he does well. And obviously he hit his irons incredibly a year ago. But you have Knapp, Finau, Rahm, -19, -24, -17. Those would be the things that I would be looking at this time around. I do want to make a special note of Antoine Rosner. So Roz is back, not from Fraser, but from France, and he's actually coming off a pretty decent finish here. You wouldn't know because if you're only looking at PGA Tour numbers, yeah, he was T48 at Farmers. That's fine. He lost 5 strokes around the green. You're not going to lose that in Mexico because it's so easy to chip at this course. But he's a pretty quality player, and he was just T4 at the Qatar Masters overseas. That was the last time that we saw him play. So I thought that was pretty interesting to think about right off the hop anyway. When you're going on a golf trip, you don't need any more stress. You don't need any more costly airline fees. With complimentary insurance, real-time tracking, and dedicated support and on-time delivery, you need to use ShipSticks.com. Just schedule your shipment, attach your label, and ShipSticks handles the rest, delivering your gear directly to your destination. You don't want to have to worry about a connection, whether your clubs are going to make it and you're racing to the course. No, your clubs are going to be there. ShipSticks offers white glove shipping for golf clubs and luggage. Travel worldwide without luggage. ShipSticks delivers to 180 countries for a hassle-free, gear-free journey. Right now, ShipSticks is offering my listeners 20% off your first shipment when you go to shipsticks.com and use the code PatMayo. Go to shipsticks.com and use the code PatMayo to get 20% off your first shipment and save yourself the hassle this golf season. That's shipsticks.com. Make sure to use the code PatMayo so they know that I sent you. Welcome to the TGL presented by SoFi, golf's newest league. It's sharp and it's electric. 2 hours of hammer dropping, overtime forcing, playoffs on the line golf with 24 of the best players from the PGA Tour. Monday, February 17th, triple header time. Atlanta versus LA, Atlanta versus the Bay, and the Bay versus Boston. Then Tuesday, it's Tiger and Jupiter against the New York Golf Club. Tune in to TGL matches only on ESPN, ESPN2, and ESPN+. Keep up. It's golf. I do want to create a model for this course, and that's the next thing that we're going to do because I don't actually have one. I go and manage my models. And maybe it is down at Vedanta. Let's see. Do I have a Vedanta? No, I don't have a Vedanta because I'm usually away for this and just make gut picks. It's funny that I went there, made gut picks. I used Fantasy National, obviously, when I was scrolling through it on vacation a year ago. Made some shirtless picks on the beach and hit Jake Knapp as a winner. Maybe I need to bring that back for Honda this year. We'll see if we can just keep rolling that out. But no, I don't have a Mexico Open or a Vedanta. I had Mayakoba, but unfortunately that's only on Live these days. And I don't even think it's on Live anymore. I think they're playing at Chapultepec in Mexico this time around. So we have to create a new model. And we'll call this Mexico Open 2025 and see what we got going on. I mentioned driving distance. We're going to throw in driving distance. And we're going to throw in those big proximity ranges, and we're going to throw in eagles. And then we'll try to figure out what else that we want to throw into this type of course. There's driving distance. We're going to throw that in. We're going to add a stat, and we're going to call it proximity 175 to 200 and proximity 200 plus. Those are going to be the key ranges for us this week. As we swing back over, just very briefly, I'll just update the model, although obviously we don't have anything in there. In the course breakdown, you can see the shot distribution. 41% of shots come from 200 plus. Now, a lot of that has to do with the par 5s and par 3s and those super long par 4s, and then 175 to 200 at 21%, then 150. There's not a lot of like wedge play at this course, which makes it a lot different than most of I wouldn't even say the longer ones, but most of the easier courses on tour. You think, hey, bomb and gouge, hit some wedges in. Not really what we're going to see because you have these 4 par 4s that measure 450 to 500 yards and another 2 that are 500 plus. Like the wedge play you're going to probably see is going to be on the really long par 5. That's there's 2 of them over 600 yards. So you're going to see like your 100s and your 75 to 100s. The 0 to 75 is probably going to be on that short par 4, and you're around the green play. You see accuracy is pretty high here. Green regulation, it's not super high, a bit above average, but as I mentioned, the chipping is pretty easy. Fewer 3 putts than normal, and driving distance here is almost 300 yards, well above tour average. So it's a grip it and rip it. Again, don't hit it in the water. The cut line has been -1 each of the first 3 years at this tournament. And you can even see the shot distribution around the green really does not play into anything. That is the big difference here. I mean, obviously the difficulty level between this and Torrey Pines is so much different. But when we take a look at Torrey Pines, you'll see that around the green, driving and approach are a bit flatter across the board, where that is simply not the case here. Like around the green doesn't really mean a ton. It's like when we get to Valero, and it was one of the main reasons to back Akshay at Valero is that he's kind of crappy around the greens, but if he's going to win, he's just going to hit a ton of greens in regulation. And that's what you're going to find here as well. When we take a look at the top 5 finishers, you can see it's even a bit more pronounced. Like they're good around the green, but they're making a ton of putts. They're mashing it off the tee, gaining over 2 strokes per start from the winner. So what would that be? 2.8 strokes on off the tee, and then over 4 strokes on approach per tournament, and over like 4.5 putting amongst the top 5 finishers. That's how you were getting there. But ball striking does outweigh short game because around the green means so little at this tournament. And you can see everyone kind of beats up on the par 5s. If you can make your bones like Knapp did last year on the par 3s and the longer par 4s, that's actually how you win this tournament. Hence why you do have that crossover with Torrey Pines, because that's how you win at Torrey Pines as well. I don't want to do a new model. I actually want to edit my Mexico model and continue to go into this. We'll add proximity over 200 plus. We just saw that. Probably don't want to put DK points in. That's for more of a scoring model. So proximity 200 plus, and we're going to throw eagles into that as well. So this is going to lean bombers, obviously, but that's honestly what we're looking for from this. Now we'll throw in strokes gained approach, because obviously that does mean a ton here. As you saw, it still is the most important thing, but we do already have 2 approach stats in there, so we don't need to weight it as much in my mind. At least we're going to throw putting in there. You know what? I'm actually going to throw it into different realms of putting. We'll go down to the bottom and we'll go. It's so easy to make putts inside 10 feet. I don't necessarily think we have to throw that in. We'll go 10 to 15 and 15 to no. We'll do it. Those are the 2 most predictive putting categories. The closer you get to the hole, the more predictive it tends to become, but these greens are not difficult to read. So we'll throw in guys that generally putt well from 5 to 15 feet overall and roll with it that way. We can take a look at tee to green and ball striking, but we've already really figured those out a little bit. We're going to put in not necessarily opportunities gained, but we will put in birdies gained on the field, or even birdies we don't even really need birdies or better gain because we have eagles in there already. And then we'll take a look at the longer par 3s and the longer par 4s. I don't want to double up too much on this stuff because proximity from 200 yards plus would correlate pretty well with par threes from 200 to 225 yards. But I am going to throw in those longer par fours, 450 to 500 yards. I'm not going to go over 500 yards because there are so few holes of that length as a par four on tours that it's just a very minuscule sample. Even if you go back 50 rounds or so, that it's really picking and choosing. That if someone had like one or two outlier results, like they jarred one from the middle of the fairway and got super lucky, it's going to skew those stats way too much for me. So I'm going to keep it out. So driving distance, I want that up there. And obviously those two key ranges with proximity, and I'm going to weight approach a little bit higher than those. Eagles, I'm going to keep a little bit lower down, but I'm going to use eagles in place of the par 5 scoring. 5 to 10 feet putting, a little bit more influential than we saw with eagles gained. Birdies gained, I'll put right or just above eagles gained, and then the key par 4 range, 450 to 500 yards, I'll weight a little bit higher than those key putting ranges, a little bit less than driving distance. So just using the sliders on fantasynational.com/Mayo for that discount, and you get access to the best leaderboard in the biz, the only one you're ever going to want to use. That works out to 20% on approach, 17% driving distance, 11, 10, 10, and 10 for the putting in both proximity ranges. So those four, eagles at 4%, we'll move that up to 5%, why not? Birdies at 5%, and the key par 4 range at 11%. Let's see who does well over the past 12 rounds in the field. Nikolai Højgaard, number 1, not Rasmus Højgaard, Nikolai Højgaard. Now, it's worth noting that he only has the one round under his belt, or one tournament under his belt right now so far this season. And I believe he was top 30 on the DP World Tour. I could probably effort that for everyone if that worked out. Let's see. Nikolai Højgaard, how has he been doing? Nikolai Højgaard, overall 69th. Nice in the world rankings. He was 65th at the Hero Desert Dubai earlier this year before going to Phoenix. I bet him in Phoenix. I don't think that there's actually that big of a skill gap between he and his twin brother, he's now. It's funny because last year Nikolai second place at Torrey Pines for one thing, and then he was pretty good at the Masters too, another big driver heavy course. Phoenix is a big driver heavy course. He gained on the field driving distance wise, just lost in accuracy, couldn't chip to save his life, but was inside the top 10 in terms of approach. 5 strokes on approach for Nikolai in Phoenix 2 weeks ago, and gained a bunch putting. Like I think you're going to see Nikolai Open at pretty good odds, and I think that he's going to be a bet for me coming into this. We'll just see. Did he play Mexico last year? I don't really remember like what he's really been up to because he kind of fizzled out after a hot start. He's actually played it each of the past 2 years and did not play it pretty well. Cannot chip or putt at this course. All right. So that's not good, but he was one of the favorites in the field that time around. You might be able to grab him. It's difficult to say how everyone is going to be priced, but because Rasmus is playing, he is going to be one of the top 5 favorites, despite finishing plus 5,000 in 2 rounds at Torrey Pines this week and sinking many a DraftKings lineup. But you can just see Nikolai, like the approach play is so good if you can get him to make his putts. And he did do that in Phoenix, although those were faster greens, and obviously he did well at the Masters last year. Again, very fast greens. Torrey Pines, very fast greens, where he ended up coming in second and gaining. So maybe fast greens are more where you want to take him over anything else. I mean, it's difficult to lose that many strokes chipping, especially at this place. But you see, the driving has been bad, but the driving, distance-wise, I would assume, has still been very good for him. It's just the accuracy that's likely holding him back. Let's see. Yeah, he's gaining distance every single time that he's out and missing a ton of fairways. So if it gets bad, he's going to hit the ball into the water. But if he misses the water, the rest of his game seems very primed to make a run here at the right odds. I'm not betting Nikolai at 40 to 1. I'd bet Nikolai at 75, 80 to 1 if that's where he wants to come in. So overall, past 12 rounds, a very small sample. You're going to get Nikolai Højgaard at number 1, Toasty at number 2, Wes Bryan at number 3, Brian Bros, shout out, Rasmus Højgaard at number 4, there's Antoine Rosner coming in at number 5. I like Rosner a lot this week, and I think you might be able to catch like an 80 to 100 to 1 on him. People just are not thinking about him. Eric Van Rooyen is very interesting because there's so much water on this course. What's the one thing we know about EVR? Dude loves putting it in the middle of the water. Now, if we think back to the first round leaders over the past few years, EVR shot a 64 2 years ago and was second to Austin Smotherman after round 1 in 2023. And he got progressively worse as the week went along. We've already seen that he came top 10 here last year. How did he do that? Well, he was the first round leader here a year ago. He shot a 63 in round 1, 6 shots better than any of his other rounds. Wacky Valimaki was 64, the first of his 4 rounds in the 60s last year. David Lipsky was actually 65 last year, and he shot a 78. Now, we saw Eric Van Rooyen get off to a hot start at Pebble Beach as well. And EVR won in Mexico 2 years ago, but at the Cabo course. Obviously not on the Baja Peninsula. We're in the meat of Puerto Vallarta in Mexico this time around, but still, he's played well on some of these surfaces, and he rates out really well. The issue with him right now is his driving sucks, which is not something you would normally expect from EVR. He dropped shorter course, obviously dropped 2.3 strokes in his 4 rounds at Pebble and Spyglass during that elevated event. He was like 6 under through 9 holes and was running away with Pebble, and then everything went off the rails, and he came T40. The putting was pretty good, though. Missed the cut at Wampo, but he did gain off the tee in those 2 rounds and on approach. It's the approach that's usually the struggle, but that's been a lot better recently. And you can see going back to basically mid-season last year, 3M, tons of water, not great. Minnesota guy, though, went to the University of Minnesota. He lost off the tee, and then it got really bad. Minus 2.3, minus 4.6, minus 2.5, minus 1.3. And these are against some weaker fields as well. Obviously, Pebble's not a weak field, but Farmers, Shriners, and the Utah tournament, these were not the tippity-top fields that we're thinking about. But if you can just get his driving back to where it was, like even midway and earlier on last year, you can see like he crushed it tee to green, especially ball striking at this tournament last year, then parlayed that into a T2 the following week. And it's not like his form was any better. He missed the cut and he was a little bit better, and he had won in Mexico during the swing season. So yeah, his form was better. And obviously his driving had been a lot better coming in. It's not like the results were markedly better than what he's showing so far this season. He wasn't missing every cut, but I do like him as a rebound, again, depending on what his odds are going to be. Maybe it's just first round leader. You play with him. He puts everything he's got into those first 9 holes, and then he's spent the rest of the time. But we are catching him on a downswing right now. I don't think that means you need to immediately fade him just because the game's not where it is. You can even see over the past 12, the model stuff that I looked at, still showing him turning out pretty well. Then it's Knapp, Kitayama, Alex Smalley, Matteo Montesero, who I felt did well at Torrey Pines. Yeah, he did. He was T25. Most of that was approach around the green. I actually don't know if Matteo, he doesn't look like he'd be super long off the tee. I doubt that he is. Yeah, he drops distance by and large everywhere else, but I guess the long irons work out pretty well for him. The approach play is really good. Don't know if I love him here with this, and you can see the driving distance at 122, but he still rates out really well because he had the best proximity from 175 to 200. Not great from beyond that number, though, but the birdies and the putting so far on the PGA Tour and the approach play has just been so good. You see Lauer, Jackson Suber rates out pretty well. Where did he show up? I think it was Sony Open. He showed up earlier this year. Yeah, it was. He was 6th at the Sony. It's a short course. Did make the cut at the Farmers, though, at the same time. Jaeger, who we saw had great course history. Sexy Roy. He's not your Roy toy. Kevin Roy looking all right. He's 10th in driving distance. If we just sort by driving distance, I do want to give a longer sample to this. We'll go past 36 rounds. 3 tournaments. It might give you some false data on some of this stuff. Goddard all of a sudden pops up number 1 in driving distance. So guys that we thought did well that we wanted to do well at Torrey Pines. Now, Thorbjornsen won me $20K in the first round at Torrey Pines because he birdied the very final hole of the day, that long par 4. So shout out to him. This should be a tournament where you'd think he does well. In the past 36-hole power rankings, he comes out at number 5 when we extended it down a little bit. But where are we at here? Where is he? Let's take a look. Michael Thorbjornsen, where are you popping up at, pal? There you are. How you doing? The off-the-tee game has been bad, but it's not due to lack of distance. It's due to lack of accuracy, and now we're getting him to a spot where it's not so bad. He was miserable around the greens in Phoenix, like truly horrible. He wasn't as bad at Farmers. The approach play hasn't been quite where we've seen it. We've seen him pop, though, in a few different spots. It's going to be pick your poison with him, but we know that he's elite off the tee. Still a very young guy that maybe this could be a spot for him. So you have Chris Gotterup, the Poltergeist, Aldrich Potgeiter is number 2, a guy that crushed my dreams, but he did play in the final group at Torrey Pines. What the hell did he end up coming? It's got to be outside the top 20. Poor dude. Yeah, he ended up coming 15th at Farmers. Good for him. The approach and around the green were bad. He hits it so far. But Gotterup is a winner on the PGA Tour. And as you can see, he ended up coming T25 at Farmers, but he was inside the top 10 going into the final round as well. So not to overlook how he's done. How's he played at driver heavy course? He did make the cut at the 3M, wasn't great. Got his win in the alternate event last year. Byron Nelson, again, Craig Ranch was one that I mentioned. He came T24. Puerto Rico's a bombs away event, did not do too well here, did not play this event last year. Let's see, his around the green game is just so putrid. Has not played in the Mexico Open, only at the Amex. So interesting from him. I'm not going to hate him this week. But again, if he's like 35-1, then no. If he's 50-1, then it's going to be a no. Taylor Moore is probably not an 80 in his future at this course, which is always really nice. Another player who does well at driver-heavy courses, by and large, inside the top 10 overall in driving distance. Had a pretty good run in Phoenix a few weeks ago. He did make the cut at the Farmers and shot 80 in the final round, which is never great, but 2 decent performances since. An elevated event at Pebble Beach, played pretty well. He was 7th at the Amex, 9th. When he got his win, it was at Valspar again, which is a pretty big driver. I mean, it can be a club down course if you want to play it that way, but again, one of those ones that's adjusted for par. Houston's a big driver heavy course. Feel like he's done well at Rocket Mortgage too, which is another bomb and gouge, no rough course. Yeah, he's in 3 starts at Rocket Mortgage. He's come inside the top 10 every single time. A lot of that has to do with putting, but dude is a pretty good putter. Actually came just outside the top 20 at the Masters. He came T20 at the Masters last year too. So driver heavy courses is a spot for him, and he was top 35 2 years ago at the Byron Nelson Great Tee to Green Week at another bombs away, driver heavy, low rough type course. So Taylor Moore, a player that we could potentially look at this week too. Again, all going to be if the odds are correct. Does not rate out well overall, but the distance is there. Pearson Cody, oh, he's back. Look at him, 7th in driving distance. Killa Keith is up there. It's just, will Keith ever make enough putts? I mean, he changed putters midway through the tournament at Pebble. Actually started to putt pretty well. I have no idea how he's doing this week. I don't remember his name from like the top of the leaderboard, so I assume poorly. But overall, classic Killa Keith results. Good ball striking, great off the tee, good on approach, cannot putt to save his life. Chipping, getting a little bit better. If you can catch him in the right week, maybe it could be what he does. He missed the cut. I mean, once he blew the Sanderson Farms by missing that super short putt down the stretch and ended up coming in third, just gagged away that win. Like he went into a death spiral. So I would just kind of throw this stuff out. He was in a bad mental state after blowing that win. Couldn't make a cut. He's rebounded very nicely so far this year. He probably will be one of the favorites, though. So it's not like I'm going out of my way to actively target Keith Mitchell at 28-1. Probably a pass for me on that. But with the odds being a little bit better, I could see it going my way. Hayden Springer, EVR, Paul Waring is up there too. Trevor Cohn, Tim Whiting. There's Jake Knapp, Big Norm. Saladina actually played pretty well, as did Big Norm at Torrey Pines. Christoph Ventura, again, as you can see, does not rate out that well overall, but is in the top 20 in driving distance, as is Nikolai Højgaard. Crazy Carl Wan, we saw him in that Panama stretch as well, is 25th in the field and in the field again this week. Nicholas Nogard Moeller, or just Nicholas Moeller, or just Nicholas Neugaard, depending on where you bet him at in the nomenclature and naming that they bring in with their API. You have to kind of search around for him. There's Ricky Castillo that we talked about. Rico Hoey. I mean, why not with Rico Hoey? Dude breaks my heart all the time. He's a pretty good player. Feel like he's going to get a win at some point. As you can see, he's just elite off the tee. Usually the approaches come along with him, but that has not been the case, and the chipping's been really bad, and the putting's been really bad so far. He has not played he played the Mexico Open last year. The past 2, he played the Mexico Championship on Corn Ferry in 2020 and missed the cut. Played the Mexico Open last year and missed the cut. But he does seem to be in a little bit better spot right now. Does have some elite finishes. He had a second at the CO, that's one that Harry Hall ended up winning. Rocket Mortgage, he was top 10. That's a bombs away driver heavy course. He was third at the Shriners during the swing season. So he does have some pretty good finishes. They just have not been present so far in 2025. Maybe wait for him to pop something off and look really good. He was the 36-hole leader with Chuck Hoffman at the American Express. Then he had to play the the Stadium course twice, and that was just sort of the end of him. Chuck Hoffman is back in the field this week. He kind of let everyone down in Phoenix, but not a terrible time to go back to him, honestly. He has a win in Phoenix, not in Phoenix. He has a win in, I believe he won in Mayakoba in Mexico at some point. Yeah, he did in 2014. He won the then OHL at Mayakoba in Mexico. He's won the American Express. He's won Valero. He hasn't won a ton, in the recent past, although maybe he'll give Valero another go. Win second in his career at Valero, another second. Just plays great at that course. It just plays well in Texas overall. But what we've seen from him outside of the terrible driving performance, and one of those was a penalty that he incurred and had to go back to the tee box. But it's not like the approach play was bad. Dude can't putt to save his life. That's an issue. But even at the Farmers, played pretty well. Tee to green was large. American Express came inside the top 10, and you can see overall his ball striking is just really good. He will actively putt you out of tournaments. Yes, that can happen. And listen, there's another one right here. We talked about 3M, with all the water, driver heavy. He gained almost 8 strokes on approach. You don't really want him at these shorter precision courses. You need to have something where his distance and prodigious driving comes into play. I mean, he's going to have bad weeks. That's going to happen when you're not an elite player. Even for the elite players, we saw Scotty Scheffler's second round, which was amazing, by the way. Couldn't drive, couldn't hit an iron, didn't make a bogey and finish -5. That's terrifying if you're playing against Scheffler, because once he gets his shit together, he should be fine from that regard. So Chuck Hoffman has to go on the short list as well, but we've identified some names from the back end of the field that we like, be it Potgieter, Gotterup, Ricky Castillo was one of the other ones that we took a look at. If we do take a look at the overall rankings from the model that I just built, over the past 36, you sort of get, we'll take a look at Alex Smalley as well. Kitayama, Nikolai Højgaard, Alex Smalley, Harry Hall, Thorbjornsen is 5th, Matty Schmidt, who is another big driver off the tee, but only tends to play well at Pete Dye courses, weirdly enough, is, 6th, Ben Martin, Michael Kim, our guy. Michael Kim's going to be 15 to 1. I'm going to have to bet him because I bet him every week. I told him I would until he wins, and he's sniffing, getting closer. Toasty, Kevin Roy, Rasmus Højgaard, Mav, there's Chuck Hoffman, Chan Kim, Joe Highsmith, the man in the Highsmith, number 15. Not off to a great start in 2025. Kevin Yu, good luck this week for Kevin Yu. Antoine Rosner, Vic Perez, Hayden Springer. Thorbjorn Olesen is back in the field. Totally forgot Aaron Rai is playing. Doesn't feel like a great Aaron Rai course because he's not great with those longer irons. He's better from 175 and in, but he is a classier player in terms of skill than most of this field. Jesper Svensson is there. There's Sam Stevens. Longer term does not rate out as well, but does very well in those longer par 4s. That's where he made his bones, that in the putting at Torrey Pines. It's going to be hard to get away from Stevens, honestly, this week. If you can catch a 30 on him, it's probably going to get bet down pretty quickly. So just keep that in mind once the odds are released on Monday morning. I'm going to go back a little bit further than the 50. I'll go to 50 rounds to look at this 450 to 500 yard to see who is the best in this field. Toasty actually plays it the best. When was the best we saw Toasty ever do? Well, he's won me 2 GPPs each of the past 2 years at Torrey Pines, so that's interesting to know. It's usually when he plays the North Course, though. He's not super great at the South Course, which is somewhat problematic. I don't even know if he's made the cut at Farmers, despite having 2 great rounds. Yeah, he came 43rd and missed the cut. How was he in Mexico last year? He missed the cut, but was 10th here the year before that. Houston is where he had his big pop-off. Another driver-heavy course. He putted really well that week, but overall we can see that he's about break-even on Paspalum greens. That's something that we'll dig into here in a moment. So Toasty, McNeely, Joe Highsmith, there's Carson Young, which is really strange for a guy with not a lot of distance. Patrick Fishburne, Norlander, Michael Kim, Rogers, there's Smalley again. So Alex Smalley keeps popping up. Antoine Rosner keeps popping up, as does Sam Stevens. Let's see. We got Toasty, Smalley. Alex Smalley. Bad putter. This we know about him. Gained a bunch in Phoenix, though. Did not make the cut at Farmers, despite gaining on approach on the South Course, but did have top 20. So he has 3 top 25s in 3 starts so far this season. I believe he did pretty well in Mexico 2 years ago, 2022. He was 6th and he has missed the cut each of the past 2 years at this venue, despite gaining a bunch off the tee and losing 4.5 strokes putting, lost 2.1 strokes putting the year before that, although he gained 4 and a bit more strokes around the green, despite still missing the cut in only 2 rounds. So he's playing a bit better golf right now. He's rolling it a little bit better. Again, all these guys are going to be price sensitive in my mind, that you're going to catch good numbers on some of them. I don't think that you even someone like Harry Hall. So Harry Hall is one of the better players in this field, at least with the way that he's trending right now in terms of his performance. Picked up the win at the ISCO last year, beating Rico and Neesmith in that playoff, and along with Pierce and Cody. But he's like an average player. I wouldn't be worried about 59th in this field of 134 or whatever it is in terms of driving distance. That's good enough in my mind. He's not the best from 175 to 200, but that plus 200, he's great. First in birdies over this stretch, great putter over that stretch, great on approach, and great on these long holes over this stretch. So he's going to end up being, when we start thinking about what the odds are going to be, not all of these guys can be 22 to 1, but you're going to get squeezed in that. I think you'll get squeezed in that 30 to 50 area, that you'll just see a bunch of guys at 30, between 28 and 40 to 1, where some of them will fall during the week. The more popular guys will end up rising throughout the course of the week. And I should be able to peg who those guys are when I do guess the odds a little bit, but I thought this was pretty interesting. We'll take a look at Eagles as well. Ben Silverman, wow. For a guy with 0 driving distance, he and David Lipsky just make a ton of Eagles. Why? I mean, Silverman's a great putter, and he's normally very good around the greens as well. Toasty makes a bunch of Eagles, so does Smalley, so does Valimaki, so does Kitayama. Now, Kitayama and Valimaki share second place finishes at this event in the past. Hayden Springer, also very good. Shout out to our guy, Adam Svensson, Canadian. Cool Bet sponsored. I'm a friend of Cool Bet. And so was Adam Svensson, my guy. Might be on the show sometime soon. Who knows? Matt Wallace up there as well. Jake Knapp, obviously won this tournament last year. Michael Kim up there in Eagles, and is actually more of a plus in driving distance than you would think. The second best player in the field over the past 50 rounds from beyond 200 yards as well. So a lot is pointing to him. There's Antoine Rosner again. Someone named Matthew Riddell is up there. Pot Gaita, very good at making some Eagles. S.H. Kim, Pearson Cuddy, Aaron Rye, Kevin Roy, Rasmus Højgaard. You don't see a lot of Nikolai Højgaard up here making Eagles. Need him to make a few more Eagles, as it would turn out. But just a lot of guys who've populated the top of this leaderboard. List is interesting. I don't know if List has ever played this tournament, but this seems like a course where List, at least historic List, would play pretty well. Made the cut at the Farmers and just was a disaster on the weekend. Made the cut. The approach play is horrendous for Luke List. I don't know if he can get away with that here. He's gained positive strokes on approach once since last year's Colonial. That's in the end of May. That's not good. He's still gaining a bunch off the tee, and the putter has actually come along a little bit. It's just weird how games can fluctuate and change so much over the years, that this is what we're seeing right now from Luke List. But that's very, very interesting. If he can get it back together here, he's someone who's going to be way down on the board. Missed the cut here a year ago because of chipping and putting, but gained a bunch off the tee and on approach. That's the only time he's ever played this tournament. I mean, that's not nothing. He's won at Torrey Pines in the past as well, so that's probably a route that I will look to go to with Luke List. If he opens at triple digits, why not? This is a week to take some chances, despite the fact that we've seen some of the bigger names end up doing really well here, but we don't have a class of player. I love Akshay. Akshay is great, and he should play well this week. It's a great tournament for him. But he's not John Rahm. He's not even Tony Finau, especially in that run that Finau was on 2 years ago at the time when he piled up 6 wins over the course of 2 years. You don't have that type of player in the field this week. Let's go to putting. Putting overall. Let's see. Putting stats past 24 rounds, and where we don't have a ton of Paspalum. We will look at Paspalum overall in terms of just strokes gained total. But we'll look at past 24. We'll use the Paspalum filter on the left-hand side at Fantasy National. What tournaments does this give us? So we have Accordia in Japan, no strokes gained from there. Cocoa Beach, Corrales, no strokes gained from there. El Camaleon, no strokes gained from there. It's going to be basically this course. It's what we're looking at for Paspalum when we think about strokes gained totals. It's not great. And you can see very few players. Let's see, what does Akshay have here in terms of weighted rounds? So he has all of these rounds, but when we take a look at what's actually weighted for strokes gained, it's Mexico and Mexico only. So we're basically just looking at this course. That's problematic when we think about the best guys in the field let's just sort it by this course so we can just see how many rounds we're actually talking about. right now. So just sorted by Vedanta, we have per round averages at this course who has putted well. Silverman, Ben Griffin in 2 rounds because he missed the cut the only time he played it. Davis Riley, Akshay in 1 tournament. Chan Kim, Valimaki in 1 tournament. Ditto for Kurt Kitayama. So not a lot to glean here. Griot's putted well on these surfaces, as has Patrick Rogers. They've played it every single year it's been a tournament. Lashley and Lipsky too. So let's get out of putting. That's unfortunate that we have to look at it that way. But let's go to strokes gained. And now we can click off of Vedanta and just go with pure Paspalum once again. And now at least we'll get some strokes gained total, just to see players that have done well in these weaker field events, longer events, like Cocoa Beach. Now, so we have Puerto Rico, we have Corrales, El Chameleon, El Cardenal, which is the swing season event in Mexico, Kuala Lumpur, which hasn't happened on tour in like a decade at this point. Justin Thomas used to win that one. And Vedanta will be the ones that we'll be looking at right now. So who plays the best at those courses? Nap, Valimaki, and Rasmus Højgaard, although they each only have 4 rounds. They've only played the 1 tournament in Mexico. They haven't played those other ones, and they're averaging, almost over 3. I mean, 2 of them are averaging over 3 per round strokes gained total. Other than that, you have McCumber plays well. Lauer plays really well on these surfaces. There's Harry Hall in 22 rounds. Sam Stevens, Smalley, Vince Norman in 14 rounds. Tournaments are those? Chan Kim, Carson Young, Kitayama, Patrick Rogers. There's Jaeger in 24 rounds. So once you start expanding the sample and looking at strokes gained total, obviously this isn't just telling us putting. It's telling us guys that obviously have putted well, presumably, on these tournaments because they've done well in them, gaining strokes per round overall, even if we can't take them out individually into off the tee approach around the green and putting, we can put them all together and still look versus the field how these guys have done. There's EVR in his 24 rounds, Andrew Putnam, Ben Griffin, Grayson Sigg, Noah Goodwin. Sure, that's a person. He's there. He's playing. Don't know who he is, but he's done well in his 4 rounds. Goddard, Nikolai Højgaard, Pearson Cuddy. There's Nick Hardy as well, CT Pan. Now we're down into guys who are gaining like 0.7 strokes per round overall. It's not going to be enough to cut it. Now, obviously, they can always play better than that. But Knapp, Valimaki, Rasmus, need Nikolai. I'm feeling some Nikolai in my life this time around. Him and Rosner, I think, are probably the 2 best players you're going to get at good odds this week based on what their performances looked like, the strength of this field, and then what we're thinking in terms of the stats that we've looked at so far this week. Okay, it's time to guess some odds for the Mexico Open. This one's going to be difficult because I've already mentioned kind of the bigger players in the field this time around. I'm going to say Akshay is the favorite. I'm going to say that Akshay is 16-1 at Open. Following that, I'm going to have Rasmus Højgaard at 18-1. I think those are going to be the 2 guys that are below 20-1. And then we're going to get Jake Knapp, Michael Kim, Mav McNeely for sure, Aaron Rye, Harry Hall, and Sam Stevens between 20 and 30-1. Hopefully it's larger than that. And then we're going to have, maybe it is Nikolai Højgaard who ends up there. Who knows? Harry Hall, Keith Mitchell, Taylor Moore, Ben Griffin, Kevin Yu, even Thorbjornsson will probably be pretty high up on that list. You're going to see those guys from 30 to 50. You're going to find books they're not going to know what to do at Open for a lot of this stuff, but I feel pretty good about Akshay being the favorite, Rasmus being second, and then maybe even Patrick Rogers, depending on how well he's doing this week. So maybe even Patrick Rogers and Mav McNeely as the next 2, like those 20, 22. Like usually the Sungjae spot is like what I like to call it in this field, in this strength of field of event where he's like the 4th or 5th best player, and then he's always like 22-1 when we go and look at it. It's probably where he'll be for Honda as well next week. But those guys will probably be in the low 20s. The rest of the guys I mentioned between like 25 and 35. Then it's going to be an entire crapshoot down the board. Try to get some good early numbers. I'm going to be targeting Antoine Rosner and Nikolai Højgaard to see if their numbers come in a bit deeper than everyone else's because they've been a bit off the radar. But with the way that Nikolai has played historically, how long he is off the tee, and him gaining 5 strokes on approach in Phoenix despite not having a great week, and his brother soaking up all the attention right now makes him a very viable play. If he opens 60-1 or higher, I am going to get in on that because I think that number will end up getting down. And I think if Rosner opens 80 plus, and he probably opens at triple digits, honestly, I will be betting that instantly. Probably throwing my money away, but hey, This is what we do on the Pat Mayo Experience. So I want to thank you all for watching. I do have a location. It is not signed contract yet for the live show, but once that happens, I'll be putting out where to buy the tickets in the Mayo Media newsletter. My write-up will be in the newsletter, so please go subscribe to that for free. Mayo Media Substack right now. You can find all that information down in the description. Code Mayo at Underdog will get you a deposit bonus of up to $1,000 as well. So go check that out because we got some pick'ems coming up for all these tournaments, and major season best ball is approaching at the moment. So please get in there because we're going to have some fun with it, all right? Smash a like on the way out, and I will see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!